6 o'clock, and will now call to order the June 9th, 2014 meeting of the Easthampton Conservation Commission. Are there any public concerns, non-agenda items? No. Seeing none, we'll move on to public hearings and meetings. Continuation of the notice of intent filed by the Potomac Conservation Trust regarding the Brickyard Brook Conservation Area between 405 and 417 East Street Culvert Repair Replacement Project.
And I have extra agendas here if anyone would like to follow along with the meeting.
And
I assume
Laura, would you like
you were
to come up?
talking, and I assume you called up Past Comic?
Yes.
Okay, and as you know, I made a mistake. I sent our state paperwork to Boston instead of Springfield. This is my first time doing this.
Okay.
But that has been corrected. I did send it to the correct address last Thursday.
Okay.
So we know you cannot take action on our application tonight, but you had raised some concerns at our site walk, and so we tried to come up with a mechanism to address those concerns. And we have put together a draft RFP that we're going to send out to the various contractors, and I think Tom has copies of that. Sure. So that you each can read them and explain, but basically that, and John and Tom can explain basically our approach. Our approach is basically to put the onus on the contractors to come up with a construction schedule, a sedimentation and erosion control plan, maintenance and flow plan and a restoration plan, and then submit that to us, and then we will submit that to you 2 weeks before work commences. And we're hoping that addresses some of your concerns. And here is the scope of services.
Yeah.
And John and Tom can better explain that. But we would like to do the work this summer, so we're sort of in a tight time frame.
And do you know, I'm going up, actually I'll pass this along. Do you know when or if DEP Western Region has confirmed receipt of their copy?
No, I sent it
sent it
Thursday
on?
morning.
Okay.
The post office said they would get it on Friday.
Okay.
That's, I have heard nothing.
Okay, I just want to do some quick math on that.
Well, we can send out our RFP and hoping we will get your approval. That's, I think, the approach we want to take. And we just obviously can't do any work without your approval.
Right, right. And so it would be, obviously we'd have conditions, and we can't do anything tonight. We can just talk about our options.
Does Pascomic Valley have the, could they send this out for bids with the understanding that we haven't given approval at this point? I mean, and just take the risk?
They can do, this is no offense, they can do whatever they want in
Right.
terms of soliciting bids.
Right. It's just taking a
The
risk.
more, right, the more unanswered questions. So you're correct in that we will require prior to commencement of work, a water management plan. Is, one of the things that I was concerned with, given the steepness of the slopes on the site, was a slope restoration plan. After the work is done and there's bare soil, what's going to be done to stabilize that? What kind of vegetation is going to be proposed in that area, so that it can take hold? I understand the specific schedule would be subject to the contractor and their schedule.
We are gonna riprap the banking and then put in a seed mix for the top area. Some kind of New England wildlife seed mix, but it's gotta be conformed to those specific areas, which is shady mostly.
Right, you have a good canopy.
Number 4 of our scope of services is a restoration plan, specifying materials and methods for restoring design grades and stabilizing the work area post-construction. Is that what you mean by slope restoration?
Yep.
Yeah, it's the fourth one.
So, my reservation, my hesitation is that these are all things that are subject to the commission's approval once we've granted a permit. So is the commission comfortable with taking on that many supplemental information items?
And so again, they are construction sequence, maintenance of flow plan, and then stockpiling, erosion sediment control.
Right.
And
Yeah. I mean, I don't mind if they come in late, I just think that the work couldn't commence until we review and approve them, right?
Right.
So, I mean, even though the contractor then does a bulk of work to get all these documents prepared, then they possibly wait up to maybe a month, depending upon our schedule, and before they can then get out there and begin work again. So it's a bit of a, I guess chunks of work for
We
them.
know it's a time crunch for you and for us, but we're hoping that this approach, I think, meets with your approval, and then we can go ahead with our RFP this week, and hopefully the time frame will work for you
Mhm.
and us. If it doesn't, we have to wait till next season.
Okay. So, that said, we have to continue this to our next hearing regardless. I think you understand the potential risks associated with this sort of approach. I understand you're in a tough bind too. But that said, our next meeting is June 23rd, which will fall before, if DEP received it on the 7th, DEP has 21 days from date of receipt to issue a file number and any potential comments they may have. There's nothing that says they can't issue it before that 21 days is up. It all depends on how busy they are. But that 21 days might end June 28th. So there's, again, a potential gap, but there's nothing we can do about that.
Do we run out of time if you can't act on our application until your first meeting in July?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a time limit to end this hearing, which started 2 weeks ago, that would not?
As long as it's continuously continued to a date certain, no,
Okay.
not
Then
really.
If we'll take our chances.
Okay, very good. So we will,
Can I just,
go ahead.
in terms of the few things that are kind of in flux, some of these things are things that we would just kind of deal with in construction anyways. But relative to maintaining flow, especially, and also potentially the seed mix, if there was a way to at least come to us with some thoughts for the next meeting, because the maintenance of flow, depending on if they want to put in some temporary cofferdams and temporary piping, can increase the project impacts. So, I think we'd want to try to at least permit in our permit documents, reasonable or conservative,
Estimated footprint of work.
Yeah, exactly. So that way, when the contractor comes back with something, hopefully it's already accounted for, even though it may not exactly be the same thing.
That makes sense.
And then if you had a seed mix in mind, that we could just not worry about that.
The plan specified that, someone's cutting plan, conservation seed mix, or erosion control seed mix, or whatever.
Okay.
But I think, we might add a note, or equivalent, or approved equivalent.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm familiar with it. Okay, so do you have anything more?
Nothing more to add.
Chris, do you say?
Good.
Okay.
Bill Cannon is here if you want to ask him any specific questions.
So, hi Bill.
That he came up with the
And-
project plan.
Thank you, Tom. So we were just discussing schedule and logistics and what the commission can and can't do moving forward at this time. We can't close the hearing, we don't have a DEP file number. We may or may not have it before the next meeting, but we understand that PCT wants to put this out to bid with some requirements on the contractors to come up with and propose a water management plan, slope stabilization, erosion sedimentation controls, and schedule. And that's more things than we usually leave open-ended for our approval, post-approval. But that said, Dan was just mentioning if we could come up with an estimation, and by we I mean you, come up with an estimation of a footprint of work within areas subject to jurisdiction. So not actually taking a stab at not necessarily the specific means and methods, but, you know, from here to here within the stream for water management, and linear feet of bank and things of that nature, so that we can put together a permit that covers the work conservatively. Does that make sense?
Okay. Was that previously explained to you?
That was, we just talked, right as you were arriving.
And we will give you this information for final approval before construction starts. That's the idea.
That's
So
the
you will have
understanding.
another stab at
Right.
it.
Right. No, I'm less concerned with that and more keeping things the way they ought to be in terms of administrative procedures. So, all right.
And we'll want to work with Jim Gracia when we finally have a contractor so we can address that drainage problem
Oh, good. And I did mention that to Jim, so
off
you're
the
not.
cul-de-sac.
Yeah, we'll have to adjust some of our snow removal methods
Okay.
at that cul-de-sac, because I think that's probably the biggest problem, snow going in there, correct?
Well,
And road drainage as well.
road drainage, I think, is an even bigger problem.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
We don't have a lot of options there as far as getting up the water, so
Mhm.
we'll have to think about that.
Not this year's project. No, you've already got the date circled in there. Okay. Okay, so with that,
Thank you.
thank you all for coming tonight. We will continue this to June 23rd, 2014, 6 o'clock. Okay.
Right.
All right, and Bill, if you could just sign in quickly, just so we have you on the,
Awesome.
yep.
And can I
just-
have that from you, Bill? Sir.
All right.
Nice to have a man that knows what he's doing running that stuff right there.
All right, we will now move on to a request for determination of applicability filed by the Hilltown Charter Public School regarding 1 to 3 Industrial Parkway improvements to outdoor areas for playground equipment. All right.
Can we come forward, or?
Please come forward,
Procedure.
introduce yourself for the minutes, and
I'm Laura Baker. I'm the chair of the site committee for the Hilltown Charter School. This is Molly Babise, who's been working with us as our landscape architect, doing stuff up there. And we have Amy Aaron, who's the school administrative coordinator.
okay.
Good, I can't find you.
And so I wasn't there the day that you came on site. Molly was there, and another member of our committee was there to take a look. At that time, the wetlands were not flagged, and so we did that subsequent. And you can see the flagged area, if you're really good, on the plan that we submitted. If it's hard to see, I have a second document that may be just a little easier to look at.
We'll pass it around.
Okay.
You can do it.
It's on 2 pages. And we had some email communication back and forth on the fact that this is an RDA, and maybe it shouldn't be. But we really just wanted to come tonight. I think, hopefully we've made clear what our objectives are with the site, and we're looking for guidance and advice from the committee about what's the best way for us to proceed. We hope to be able to, according to the plan that we submitted, be able to mow a reasonably large area that can serve as a playfield. Originally, we had intended to do a bunch of kind of grading and drainage work there. Given the way the delineation came out, we thought that that might be an unrealistic expectation, but we would love your comment on that. We would like to be able to install swings in this climbing structure within a buffer zone. And those are kind of the primary things. There's a little bit of planting, there's a shed. This is all buffer zone work. I think this is probably the hot topic in terms of the fact that we're basically tying together a big upland area, a couple of little upland areas, crossing this wetland area. As I'm sure people know, historically, this field has been mowed on and on. Historically, it was declared that there were no wetlands on this field, so it's been evolving, as has our understanding of it and our knowledge of what's there.
Well, we did correspond when I saw that work in wetlands was proposed.
Right.
As opposed to just buffer zone, which is typically the realm of an RDA. There are 2 regulatory citations that I threw out there. Oh, thank you for that. 2 regulatory citations I threw out there, basically, one stating that, work under an RDA is within the buffer zone, and the other saying that work that proposes alterations, good, bad, or indifferent, because there is no distinction within an actual resource area, such as a bordering vegetated wetland, is the subject of a notice of intent.
Right.
So it would, in my opinion, this work proposed within the resource area necessitates a positive determination and the filing of a notice of intent. And then that puts you into, meeting the performance standards for work within the resource area proper.
Excuse me.
Quantifying it, describing how the performance standards would be met, and things of that nature. As for drainage, even if you weren't working in the resource area, if you were proposing drainage, you would have to demonstrate how that wouldn't result in, essentially an alteration of the resource area because of the change in hydrology. Cutting off the hydrology to the resource area is the same thing as it's the same type of alteration, essentially, if it would change the character of it. I understand that this is an irregular area in that it has been mowed off and on, and as wetlands go, it's not, a bog you're in up to your knees, but it's still, a detailed delineation was performed, and the soils indicate that in the absence of vegetation that hasn't been cut, that it is a vegetated wetland.
When was the delineation performed?
Recently.
Yeah, was it May?
Yeah,
Okay.
May 4th.
Okay, thanks.
Yep. GZA performed that, and their report is in the RDA
It
package.
is, yeah. I did read that.
So, does anyone else have
No.
So,
comments they'd like to discuss?
in the meantime, to answer the applicant's question, can they mow? They cannot mow. Or can they?
That's my understanding, but
I think
we
not.
can confirm that.
Okay.
Can we mow the upland
Yes.
buffer zone area?
Yes.
Okay.
Right.
Even though it's a buffer zone, we can mow it.
Because it's been mowed.
Okay.
It's, once the resource area boundary was established, then that's where I'm not 100% certain. But I know if it were agricultural, that would be a different story altogether, but this is clearly not in agricultural use.
Right.
So we want to make sure we come back with something that you guys will approve.
Mhm.
So we don't want to do this over and over again,
Mhm.
kind of testing the boundaries.
Sure.
So were this properly filed as an NOI, is this the type of thing that the commission would approve?
Can you describe further where the vegetation management, for lack of a better term, where the invasive species control would be proposed? Because that could sound to me like a resource area improvement,
There are,
which is a permittable, depending on how it's done.
primarily within the Moen area, it's a little hard to tell what was there,
Mhm.
except that there are clearly some stumps that are multiflora rows.
Mhm.
There is multiflora rows throughout the wooded area and Phragmites up in the upper area. So those would be, especially within the mowed area, that would be something we would really want to get rid of.
Mhm.
that the seeding, if this area were to be seeded, would be slit seeded and using a combination of native grasses that are, will grow well in hydric soils. And I provided a list of what those would be. It is a reduction by 2/3 of the amount that's currently mowed, according to, we're just measuring the area. So although it is about 8,000 square feet, it's, this little tongue of wetlands is about 8,000 square feet. So our contention is that it's an improvement of the site, and that by allowing the rest of the area of the wetlands to grow up, to plant along in the swale, low-growing things that would help to infiltrate more of the water, so that there isn't so much, I mean, both of those swales, as you know, end up in catch basins that go into city storm sewer. So that was one reason why we thought perhaps it would not be jurisdictional, but I understand.
It is, because of the upgradient resource
Right.
areas, which would be sort of
Right.
contiguous. So what would the method of, would you remove the non-native invasive species, the stumps of those completely? Would you cut and treat? How would you intend to keep them from coming back? Physically remove them?
Well,
Hand pull?
keeping them from coming back is another issue than removing
That's a long-term commitment.
It is. My recommendation has been using something like a weed wrench that has really good leverage, that doesn't involve large equipment on the site. And these are small enough, they seem to be small enough stumps because they've been, well, of course you can't tell, so you really tangle with them, but that would be the least invasive method of removal.
All right, and so what, what would the area for the removal be? It would extend further beyond the field area, basically on the property, or?
Right, we need the defined
Yeah, we
limits
would-
of work.
Essentially. Thank you for putting it so succinctly.
Yeah, I mean, our main agenda obviously is having a playing field.
Right.
Right.
So we're, I mean, again, we're looking for guidance as to what, we don't need to use this area over here. If there are recommended methods that you would favor as a whole comprehensive plan to the site, that we should be dealing with invasives up here, we would be certainly open to hearing that.
There is no regulatory requirement outright that you manage invasives. I appreciate and I understand the motivation to do so. And I don't want to commit you, I don't want to suggest something that you feel would commit you to an approach that you wouldn't want to take, whatever, again, we're more than happy to talk through this, but whatever is proposed is from you. The wetland, the vegetated wetland standards in the regulations, 310 CMR 1055, if you are trying to convert a wetland area to a non-wetland area, then there has to be at least one-to-one replacement. And that comes with it a detailed replacement area plan, long-term monitoring that goes along with it to demonstrate that there's no net loss. There is a provision in the regulations that allows for consideration of resource area improvements, 1053-4, I believe. And that's kind of geared toward habitat improvements. Invasive species removal could fall within that, I believe. But that's not a limited project provision. Those are only 1053-3. So 1053-4 is a separate entity. You still have to meet standards with that. So, the easiest thing would be to stick with the boundary as it is, propose the invasive species removal and improvements within, vegetation improvements within that, and then propose the improvements as you've shown them there. I don't know if that meets your needs for an athletic field, but part of impacting wetlands, converting wetlands to non-wetlands, is an alternatives analysis. And, you know, without being rude or harsh, the environmental impact of impacting wetlands might not be sufficiently offset by the development of a playing field or expanding the area for playground areas, athletic fields.
So when you say work with boundaries as they are, do you mean just mow the uplands?
Right. That's one.
Don't mow this.
Right.
Okay.
That's one
in
option.
terms-
Shouldn't you be
yeah.
playing with us?
Yeah, I know.
No,
And actually,
no.
yeah, but that's exactly what you're saying in layman's
Right.
terms. Is if you can stay out of the wetlands and just make your play area upland of the wetlands, then
Gets easier.
Right.
yeah,
Okay.
then it gets easier to permit.
So if we are determined to do this,
Mhm.
just hypothetically,
Go ahead.
Are you saying that mowing this is such an action that it would require us to replicate these wetlands elsewhere on site?
Yes.
Just the act of
Mhm.
mowing it?
So
Unless-
Even
Alter-
without changing hydrology.
Alteration includes cutting vegetation.
Unless we go under a provision that says we're enhancing the wetland area.
Yep.
I do want to understand what you're saying.
So mowing might not be the appropriate method to make that argument. Controlling invasive species and supplementing with native species might be the way, but again, that then, wetlands don't have grass this tall, so.
So you're talking about-
habitat value is.
you're not talking about grading, just mowing. Would cessation of mowing be an alteration if there are past practices that have continued for some indefinite
Is
period?
not filling a wetland the same thing as, is no longer filling a wetland the
Yeah.
same thing as not filling a wetland?
I don't know. I mean, so just the thing that's going on in the back of my head, you said this is 8,000 square
Mhm.
feet. 5,000 square feet is a big number in terms of not just us,
Threshold.
but
Other
other
regulatory
regulatory
processes.
programs statewide. So just making sure that that's
So if you say under 5,000, is that what you're saying?
not for our purposes, but for the purposes of other
Regulatory agencies.
regulators, I'm sure would
Other
love to be
environmental
involved in
events.
just about anything they can be involved with.
That's your personal.
Okay, because I think what we're
Right.
trying to determine is just the act of mowing in an area that's been mowed on and off, is that something that would so impact the wetland that it would force replication elsewhere on site?
What's preventing me from giving you a straight answer
Yeah.
is that I don't know in this particular situation what that answer should be. If this were an undisturbed wetland and you were proposing, if someone were proposing to go in and brush hog it, then the answer is yes, that would be a wetland alteration that may not even be permittable. Because this area has been mowed historically off and on, depending on property management, I don't know the answer for sure, but I can find the answer this week if I can connect with the right people.
Okay. So potential courses of action on our part would be to return with an RDA that just does this, it
Mhm.
mows here, it asks to put these
Mhm.
things in the buffer zone, and that's a pretty straight path.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have sufficient information based on what we've provided
Mhm.
already to be able to approve something like that. Another approach would be to take this down below 5,000 square feet. Or it doesn't even sound like that's the issue. Another approach would be to come back with an NOI
Mhm.
saying, look, it's been mowed, we're going to continue mowing it, we're going to take out the invasive species.
Mhm.
We don't think we're going to adversely impact this wetland, and we don't think we should have to replicate it elsewhere. And you could just say whether you agree or don't agree with that.
That's definitely a possibility. What either option you suggested. Submitting a notice of intent requires sending a copy to the DEP Western Region office in Springfield. And they would, in addition to issuing a file number, they conduct a concurrent review. And that may or may not
They may
raise
not.
red flags with them.
So you might be of one mind, they might be of another, potentially.
If we, yeah, And decisions are, there's a 10-day appeal period, 10 business day appeal period for every decision, or at least orders of conditions and determinations of applicability. DEP can, within that 10-day appeal period, appeal our decision.
More likely they'll peel it on day 11 and say.
So we received it on day 10.
Yeah.
That aside.
Common enemy, just so I know.
Yeah.
Not in my recent memory here. But they can issue a superseding determination of applicability, they could issue a superseding order of conditions, and then that would take it entirely out of our hands and put it entirely in their hands.
Is there a third option? Like, knowing what we want to do and knowing the site and seeing this, you know, and should we be trying yet another approach that we haven't even thought of yet?
On this site.
Right. I understand you're committed to this site, that's clear. I mean, really, it's, work in the buffer zone can be presented under an RDA. Work, regardless of its merits and value, in a resource area must be filed as a notice of intent. And then the performance standards for whatever the resource areas are, and I think at this point you're really only looking at bordering vegetated wetland, so it's just 1055, would come into play. And as Dan mentioned, there's this magic 5,000 square feet number.
Do you need all that parking?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a good question. It's a question we've tossed around ourselves, trust me. No, it is. It's a good question. It's a question for the zoning board, sadly.
Right.
Yeah, it gets into, we start to bump up against other regulatory issues when we go in that direction. Okay, is it possible to get, you said maybe you could communicate with DEP over this next week. We have no interest in coming back with an NOI that you can't do.
Understood. You could always come to us for informal discussions that would be put at the end of our agenda. But we can keep our communication open to informal discussion moving forward.
Since we've filed an RDA that you have today, is it ever possible, and I can't speak for us as a group because we can't confer, but is it ever possible for you to say, you know, we'll grant you your RDA, but we don't want you working here?
We can't do that. It has to be on, and that's a great question.
We have to present.
It's on what is proposed.
Okay.
So, unfortunately, one of the benefits of an RDA is that it can be a quick and easy thumbs up. But it's only on the question that's asked, and so that does limit the options.
But we could come to the next meeting with a limited RDA.
Well,
Yeah,
2 minutes.
You could?
We can't file for the next meeting.
No, today's the deadline for the next meeting. The commission's schedule is on the
Right.
city's website, so hopefully that's accessible. It just allows us time to prepare.
Do you know how that area was mowed in the past?
Not really. The current owner hasn't owned it very long, so it's kind of trickling from the prior owner. We could see it in the aerial photos as the years pass, that it, we can see it kind of short and then getting overgrown, going back and forth. Yeah, the word was that they just, when they built this addition, that's when, this was 2002, they added this addition, they built this parking. New England Environmental said there's no wetlands on the site. The Easthampton Concom at that time agreed that there were no wetlands on the site, and they mowed the fields. They left a buffer of trees in the back. And then on and off, it kind of grew up and whacked back down again over the last decade.
The ownership changed hands during those years, and I suspect so did their landscape.
I'm sure.
And do you know offhand what what of these lines are bank and what are bordering vegetated wetland boundaries? Maybe you know,
I'm
Melissa.
gonna take a stab
Okay.
at that. I mean, you can too.
Do you know, or
I'm
do you-
gonna go with this is bank, because
Well,
it's a very clearly defined incised channel that was armored with riprap.
That's what I would have gone with too, but you
And
never
then,
know.
because there's an upland, there are two upland
Yeah.
Yeah.
these are
areas
uplands, too.
within, and I suspect it has historically to do with the development of the industrial park, but there are, from previous filings, there are jurisdictional streams that come from the west, flow easterly, under Route 10, behind Florence, Easthampton Savings Bank, and then into this channel. So, and we approved a wetland boundary for Autumn Properties, if I
Right.
recall correctly, off of.
They had
well,
flagged.
but the recent approval was up here.
Yeah.
And that had more to do with their lots along Northampton Street. That was probably 5, 6 years ago.
Yep. And is this bank here? Or is that the?
It's a very shallow, straight line.
It's
that's
more of a
just
swale,
been
that's more
moved
just
down.
a vegetated wetland
Mhm.
contiguous with
And
the
it
other
curves
area.
around and drops into that drop.
And this spring, this was pretty soggy, although when I had seen it in other seasons, we didn't know this was here. It wasn't obvious in the way that something like this is.
Mhm.
When we were here in the summer and fall, this wasn't wet. And here, this you could see was a drainage swale coming across
Mhm.
here, but appeared at the time to be isolated.
Mhm.
So we didn't really get that we had this.
Mhm.
And then in the spring, it seemed, it was more obvious that it was kind of
Mhm.
Mhm.
connected that way.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Yeah.
So what's the best way to communicate in this coming week? Is it with you through email or?
Through the conservation's email, would be best.
Do you have a phone number where you can be reached or?
I do, although, let me, it's. It is /3
Yeah.
282-7092.
7092, it's the Concom hotline.
It is a Google Voice number.
Does it work?
It does, but I don't have it forwards to my cell phone, and I don't have my cell phone on during business hours.
That's a good. Okay, but you get a message. You
Yes.
can't call that way. Okay.
Yes, exactly. All right, so is there any further discussion? Questions
Nope.
from the public? All right.
Thank
Oh,
you.
we need to
Are
make
we-
a determination.
Yes.
You get paperwork.
Do we, so we're not
Forgot
postponing
that.
this to another hearing then, it's not really,
We make a decision.
All right.
Okay.
So we can't withdraw it without prejudice now.
Not now that we've had a meeting.
All right.
But again, it's only for what was on those plans and in that narrative description, so.
Okay, I move to issue a positive determination, number 3. The work described on reference plan documents is within an area subject to protection of the Act and will remove, fill, dredge, or alter that area. Therefore, said work requires filing of a notice of intent.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. Okay, and if you could flip to the signature page. Other way. Sorry, the form was set. And if you can wait a few moments, I'll go make a copy and we can take a video.
There you go.
Sign, Mark?
How many pens have you broken doing that signature thing?
What did we do?
No, there's just
Certain flair. half the motions.
I need to make a joke about a signature every meeting.
Just-
It was funny at first, and now it's boring,
Yeah.
but in 10 years, it's gonna
It's
be
gonna be,
awesome.
we are gonna laugh and laugh.
It's quite a commitment to stay on the commission that
Yeah,
long.
I think so. It's been almost 7 already, it's like,
I
where's the
couldn't
time?
believe it. It's been like 5 for me.
Yeah.
Oh
Really?
my God. Yeah, it's so
Jeez.
long.
I was thinking you as a new guy.
I know.
That's why he's doing the minutes.
Yeah, it is. I'm like, all
None
right.
of you remember when we had no wetlands on the site, right?
Exactly.
No, no.
Back in the day.
Yeah, exactly.
Regulations were different.
Soon it'll be like that. Soon it'll be. I'll
How's
be
the
there.
project going
Oh,
otherwise?
I
besides
remember that site. That's next to
It's
so
going
and
good.
so.
Nice. That's good.
Just barely.
Yeah.
Oh, it's a squeaker. It's construction, you know, but
Yeah, it'll always-
It's gonna be a great building.
Great.
I'm very happy with the way it's turning out.
And your goal is September, or when is your, when you?
We're opening in September.
We're opening.
It's not even
It's not a goal, isn't it?
No goal, that will happen. We'll move this
We'll have to
summer.
throw down that determination and the kids can play on it. Come September.
There you go. Thank you all
Thank
for
you.
coming in.
Thank you very much.
Nice to
See
have
you
you
at the next
back.
meeting, or?
No doubt.
Yeah, right.
Just a moment to organize paper. Okay. Right, next item on the agenda, request for certificates of compliance, Hampton East Condominium, 359 Main Street, DEP file number 151230. BWE 6W018. Hello,
Mark?
who's
No, right
going to?
Norman Roy,
Right here.
Mr. Roy?
from, yeah, and I'm Mark Reed from Heritage Surveys.
Come on up, have a seat.
Did you sign in, Mr. Ray?
Hi, Mark. Oh, wait.
Did you sign into this? I don't have you on here.
Okay. So what day was it that we,
It was a very rainy day.
it was very rainy, it was
I think
dark
the
and stormy
30th.
night.
30th, because I was out of town.
Ah,
May 30th?
that sounds about right, right before Memorial Day weekend.
Yes, it
Yeah.
was for the weekends.
And it was very stormy.
It was a darkest stormy night.
It did become a dark and stormy night. So.
And what happened during that day?
We got soaked.
Yeah.
There were lots of ticks.
Really?
Poison
So
ivy.
fun.
Oh yeah, poison ivy.
Yeah.
So, I'm gonna let Dan take the lead, Dan and Jay, because they stuck around longer to observe the function of the stormwater system.
Dan was trying to figure out where some of the flows were coming from and where they were going, so.
Yeah, so,
Can we just back up and, is there, what's the problem? Or is there, what, just for the minutes, is there an issue that we wrote that there on the site?
So there's a request for certificate of compliance,
Okay.
and part of that is, I mean, there were,
I think they went through the records and found that there was no certificate of compliance, so
Right.
they're coming forward.
and this site has I think when it was being developed, had a somewhat rocky road in terms of compliance, and Concom issued an enforcement order, DEP stepped in with an administrative consent order.
Correct.
But that was, you know, unfortunately for those of us sitting here, that was before any of us were
Okay.
on the board. So firsthand knowledge is non-existent. So that's where we are. Before we sign a certificate of compliance, because of the components that were within the subject, the order of conditions, we want to make sure that we're signing off on something that was actually constructed in accordance with the order and
Sure.
plans.
Okay, gotcha, thank you.
Yep. So we walked, you know, as Melissa said, walked the site. It was pretty dry when we started, and then
And it wasn't.
it got rained pretty good. We saw a couple
Yeah.
things.
These are a full set of the as-built plans.
Okay.
Those are 2 sheets that I can give to the commission.
Yeah.
What's the date of these?
These are dated September 6, 2007.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the as-bills were prepared in 2007?
Correct.
Is that correct? Okay.
Yep.
Correct, so it's a match line.
Right, it's a long parcel.
Yeah.
Yep.
So,
So Main Street's
Mhm.
over here with Melissa, and the driveway comes in,
yeah.
access road.
So I guess there were kind of maybe three different things that jumped out to me. One is we were over here when the rain started, and it was falling pretty good, and so there's these two 4-inch PVC pipes, and there was fairly, they were flowing maybe half full after a few minutes, but it was not. I guess it's not clear to me what they connect to, and there was absolutely no water in the bottom of the basin at all. So we couldn't quite figure out where the flow was
Right,
coming
that's
from.
right. We
Yeah.
walked around there a little bit.
Right. So I guess I'm not sure.
It flows into a little stream.
Yeah.
There's a
Right.
pipe underground.
Right. This basin here, which is the second one in, all right, has got a stone trench within the bottom of it.
Yeah.
And within the bottom, or within the stone, is the 4-inch perforated pipe.
Oh, okay. So
So it's picking up stormwater for the smaller storm events into that pipe and discharging it here.
okay.
The same with this one, this stone in this area here, at the end of it, and it does the same thing,
Okay.
so it flows.
Do we have detail sheets? Maybe
I
that's.
don't even know that there were detailed sheets in the approved plans.
Yeah,
And
so-
I think this, the stormwater, this was done under stormwater management policy,
Correct.
Yeah.
given the time frame, and I think the documentation requirements at that time were not as detailed or stringent as they are today.
Right. Yes.
If you have the file.
Like Candy, we should get look in and
Yeah.
I asked him.
So I guess knowing that they're.
So,
that- Yeah.
That's what we were just talking about.
oh, okay.
So there was a structure proposed in there, a
Mhm.
leaching structure, in this one.
Okay.
What was installed was stone without the structure,
Okay.
Okay.
and there was a 4-inch overflow pipe from both of them, originally approved into the swale and into that resource area ditch that you see there. So that was part of the approved plans
Okay.
for those two.
And so these are actually drainage structures, not.
So the difference is that they did not put the drainage structures in, they
Mhm.
just put the stone and the 4-inch pipe coming out of the basins, each one of the
Okay.
basins.
And so that pipe kind of goes through the stone and is perforated to
Correct.
pick that up. Okay.
Correct.
And were these supposed to be leaching catch basins, or were these just drain structures?
They're just drainage structures to take care of the smaller storm events.
Gotcha.
Originally, this was part of the first development.
Okay.
All right. So this was modified and increased in size to not only accommodate the existing development, as you see from the back of their parking lot, we have drainage coming out,
Mm-hmm.
so that the two projects merged together,
Okay.
the original development and that. So,
So actually, they're probably getting better infiltration now than is designed.
And then before it used to be a direct discharge.
Yeah.
When was this built? Just out of curiosity.
80s.
80s?
80s, yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
oh, then that explains why it was
70s,
direct
yeah.
discharge.
Right, and
Yeah,
it's been there,
the-
8 there. Right.
That, the drainage from the first phase just used to daylight
Right.
outside, down
To that
the
little
slope.
channel?
Yeah, well, it wasn't even a channel, it just daylight at the top of ground,
And
and
format
eventually formed a channel.
Channel.
Okay.
Why we don't do
Right. You can see,
Oh,
yeah,
yeah,
there's
there
a
it is
lot.
right there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this channel, there's a lot of erosion in that
Yes.
channel.
It's,
Yep.
It's really silty, sandy, silty material, so you
Yep.
can't just daylight it.
Some of the background on the perforated pipe under the basins, the drainage basins, was the Board of Health had issues with wet bottom basins that held water for longer than 24 hours. So rather than making a bigger discharge, so they drain faster, the concept kind of got pushed forward by the Board of Health to put perforated pipe under there to let it drain out faster. And that was the only thing that satisfied them.
Okay. All right, so I feel better about that one.
Okay, good.
The other one that we were looking at was the basin out in the back. Where is that?
Where did we park? It's along
Feel
the
like it's
access
right there,
road.
right?
Oh, this one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's that one.
This one here, the infiltration
The
basin?
infiltration, I think.
Yes, this
Oh,
one
that
here.
one there.
Yes,
Yeah.
that's the one.
Yeah, this one here was added after the fact. There is a basin, leaching basin here, which was originally proposed.
Mm-hmm.
And during construction, they had some flooding issues and found that basin was not adequate enough. This dry wells and were not adequate enough, the swale wasn't adequate enough. So we designed a infiltration system with chambers in stone and installed it in this area here.
When was that done?
And that's outside of the 100-foot buffer zone. Because the wetlands are down here and way in the back.
And that's not connected to anything?
And it's not connected. No, it doesn't have an overflow.
So that's not our jurisdiction?
Yep,
Okay.
right. And there's no overflow, and it works great.
I guess that's what our confusion was, because we're watching the water go into the catch basins, and then there's like a, flare end outlet there. And we're looking at it, it says dry.
And it's dry, nothing's moving, so
Where-
all the water's
where's
going
the
in
water
here.
going?
Yeah, where's it going?
Where's it
Right.
going?
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
okay.
So that's up here against the Paul Street, David Garska's subdivision.
Yeah,
Up here.
okay.
So I mean, the sand, the soil's very sandy.
Yes.
As you know, in that area, so
Yeah.
it just
All right,
takes it all in the
Yep,
ground.
that makes sense.
so it's out of jurisdiction, and it's not going into jurisdiction
No.
anyways. Okay. And then, what? Was there anything else that we were
There's the
wondering?
mowing stuff, that's a
That's,
separate.
Oh, yeah,
that's
it's
a
a-
separate issue, and I've reminded myself again to email Courtney. In the, use these plans, where's the area, right here. So in the, just into the wooded area,
Yeah.
it looks like someone was dumping their lawn clippings.
Yeah, that was a previous landscaper was doing
Yeah,
that.
and so it's going to be a friendly reminder to the condo association to
And,
instruct the
I
landscapers not to
spoke
do that.
Yeah, I spoke to our new landscaper and I asked him to remove that stuff this
Great.
week.
Excellent, so I will send that friendly email,
Okay.
just so that we have it on our,
Sure.
and that we followed up on it, and
Yeah.
probably set a follow-up date, just to confirm that that what has been dumped there is removed, and
Okay.
and then we'll all move forward from there.
Okay.
But thank you for speaking to your landscaper.
And then there are similar changes to this basin as to the other.
Correct. And that was, dictated by the Board of Health.
Mhm.
In this area especially, and there's a little history with this. The original contractor had backfilled stumps and debris in here.
That was the administrative consent
No,
order.
no, that's
wasn't
in
it?
the
Or was
back.
that the enforcement?
Yeah.
Oh, that was
That was in
a
back.
separate
That's
issue.
Separate issue. Board of Health stepped in,
Oh.
rightfully so. And all the stumps and unsuitable soils that were put in this area were removed. I was there during all of it, and Dennis, of course, was there doing inspections and making sure that it was done properly. So this is a modification that was done based on the Board of Health. So then it has an overflow, emergency overflow.
Okay.
No, I know it was part of the original plans and it wasn't constructed, but can you, if in the future anyone were to ever come forward with tennis courts in the same location, was that impervious area accounted for in the existing stormwater, or would that need its own stormwater as it's shown there?
Yeah, it has its own stormwater
Okay,
basin.
it would have, okay.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not like it was already designed and built?
No.
If it were to ever
Because
be
the
an
grades are
afterthought.
lower down in this area here, so
Okay.
it couldn't get up to this basin.
Okay, I just wanted to
Yep.
understand.
Don't
Don't get too upset.
Yeah. This is the area of DEP's
Right.
Is that where the slope blew out?
administrative Yeah, consent order back in here.
And that has
Has been
stabilized.
stabilized, and David Follis,
Said it was okay.
correct.
Yep, I see that. So,
Okay.
any further discussion?
Seems like things are all set to me.
All right. Well, I'm gonna
Have these?
steal these.
Yep.
Have them. Shoot, that's okay. All right. I do not have any paperwork with me, but we can still entertain a motion.
Well, I don't know if we've ever done one of these.
Not recently. It doesn't happen often.
All right.
Jim.
I'll move to issue a certificate of compliance for, what was it? What's the address?
359 Main Street.
Yeah, 359 Main Street.
I'll second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. So we will complete your paperwork by our next meeting and get that off to you. And then you
Okay.
can, that can be recorded.
Mhm.
And unless there's a new project or a problem in the future, you're done with us.
All right,
Okay?
okay.
Thank you both
Thank you
for
very
coming
much.
tonight.
Yep, thank you. Thanks.
Sometimes you just put those things right out of your mind.
Let me make a to-do item. All right, next items on the agenda. In the past month, we've had two requests for emergency certificates. One came in on a weekend for Rumiko. There was a non-PCB release of mineral oil dielectric fluid from a down transformer that got into the catch basin system near 2 Ferry Street and discharged to Lower Mill Pond. They deployed booms and they've been maintaining, replacing as necessary. They did have to go in and factor floating debris. There was so much floating sticks and leaves and trash collecting against the booms that the oil was collecting behind those. So
Right.
there was a barrier. They had to factor off. But that, under the MCP, that actually gets 60 days.
And which pond did it get discharged?
Lower Mill Pond. And the address is 2 Ferry,
Ferry.
near 2 Ferry Street.
That was a tree that took the pole down, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
it took down 2 poles, I think. 2 poles, 2 transformers, I think. So that will expire July 16th, 2014. The other emergency cert that was issued, we issued to the City of Easthampton DPW for the removal of debris, beaver-related debris, from the culvert that conveys Wilton Brook at South Street, right next to the bike path. There was a considerable impoundment, down gradient, up gradient,
Up.
brain, of South Street, basically starting to form, and potentially affecting private property, threatening the integrity of South Street itself. So Jim is here to discuss the city's actions.
Well, I gave you a brief report on what we were able to accomplish last week, and basically going to do it all over again tomorrow without the concrete slabs.
Where did the concrete slabs go?
There's sidewalks, well, they've been placed off the embankment, not in the wetland, but they were above the culvert. That, and I briefly discussed it in the narrative there. That road was raised about 6 or 8 feet back in the 50s, late 50s, mainly to put cover on the sanitary sewer that ran from where the bike path is now up South Street to service Crescent Street and West Street Terrace. There were the initial stages of that development were done in the 50s. So the roads was raised, so that culvert was there deeper, and now it's down a dozen feet, 12, 14 feet to the bottom. So it's down there. The embankment along behind the sidewalk was a relatively uniform embankment, maybe a 2-to-1 slope, 3-to-1, 2-to-1 probably, and it was pretty heavily vegetated. There's been no work done on it, except for when we built the sidewalk along that stretch back in the middle 80s, or late 80s, I guess it was. Over the years, we've had some torrential downpours, and there's only 2 they're just an open throat on both sides of the road. With a culvert that goes down to the brook on both sides. Those have been in there for
You're
years.
talking about this, the runoff, for the runoff from the road?
Yeah,
Yes.
there aren't
Okay.
catch basins there per se, they're just an open throated pipe that discharges, one on both sides of the road.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, if they're maxed out with debris, water floods the road and spills over the banks. Several years ago, we had a washout on the downstream side to the Pine Valley Pool, which we notified the commission, we repaired it.
For reference, Pine Valley Pool is the pond on Mr. Gall's property that we visited last year.
Oh.
Yep.
Historically, that was a swimming hole
Mhm.
at some point in time, before my time. Anyway, little did we know that some of that erosion was happening on the upstream side as well. So there's like an indentation in the embankment, and it's right over the culvert. So there was like 6 or 8 feet of the actual culvert that was exposed.
Mm.
We discovered this when we first tried to clean this culvert out a month or so ago. We could barely reach it with a rubber tire machine. The outrigger is down, kind of hanging over the side. And we got it to drain a little bit, but it plugged up right away. This time, in order to do it, we had to build some sort of a pad to get our excavator out off the embankment. So we did it with clean slabs of concrete.
Mhm.
I say clean, there's a little bit of dirt on them, but basically there were slabs of concrete. There were some old floor slabs that were 8 inches thick that we had cut out of one of the buildings, and they were pretty neat cuts. So we laid those in the bottom, and then Lawrence Savings Bank was removing their sidewalk at the same time and redoing it. We got a bunch of slabs from them. We were able to build from the bottom up, just keep stacking slabs of concrete to the point where we could back the excavator out without tipping over and reach the end of the culvert. We did that last Tuesday. We were able to stick the backhoe in, or the excavator in front of the culvert and kind of keep flicking away. It really wasn't anything that we could tell that was outside of the culvert. Everything was packed inside of the culvert. So we ended up having to kind of surge it with the excavator, and it finally broke free. And unfortunately, I was in the pipe wash downstream, but it broke free, and the impounded water did drain after a day or so. But unfortunately, the very next night, the beavers had already blocked it enough that it stopped draining again. I was out there, we did it Tuesday, I was out there Wednesday morning with the contractor looking at the beaver deceiver method, and we could already tell the water was stagnant on the upstream side. It hadn't surcharged above the culvert yet, but it wasn't moving. And now it's back to where it was a week ago. So we're gonna go back in again tomorrow and try to relieve it. My issue right now, I mean, I know we have to file a notice of intent to do the permanent beaver deceiver, which is what we are gonna do, is that method to try to control the damage to this culvert by the beavers. Your emergency certification is only good for 30 days.
And we
It's gonna
can't,
take us longer than that to get the notice of intent put together and approved.
so administratively, we can't issue an extension for emergency certification under the regulations, but you can, I believe, go to DEP, approach them with the understanding that you're preparing a notice of intent, you're just, the schedules aren't quite as concurrent as the original emergency cert can allow.
So they can extend it?
I just did that last fall for one.
Yeah.
Yeah, they can do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, so if I sufficiently explain it to them, they can understand their predicament as far as that goes.
Yeah.
Because we're gonna have to do it weekly until we can get the devices installed.
Yep. It's hard to do anything in 30 days, really.
The other thing with the delay, it actually kind of works in our favor. This is a $2,000 installation, and the new fiscal year starts July 1st. So by the time we get the
You have
approval,
fresh
we'll have a new
money.
pot of money to work with. So in that respect, it does work a little better. But we still have to, we can't keep letting this thing fill up and flooding the backyards, and saturating the roadbed.
So,
One other thing about the emergency cert, well, maybe after we get this user deceiver in there and it's working, and it protects the culvert from being dammed up, we may be able to remove those slabs and not have to get back in there on a regular basis. But I would propose that we discuss that under the notice of intent to see if we can leave them in on a permanent basis. It does say we have to take them out in the emergency certification, but.
what is your timeline? I understand this is becoming a higher priority project that's receiving more attention. So what is your timeline for submitting the notice of intent?
How soon can I get on the agenda?
How soon can you
And
even
also,
get to work?
That's an issue.
So then we have our next meeting. So just logistically, today was the deadline for the next meeting. Actually, no, I'm sorry. No, today was the deadline for June 23rd. The next meeting after that is July 14th. The sooner you submit the NOI and get a DEP file number, the more expeditiously we can work with you on the permit application.
Okay.
If we don't have a DEP file number, we cannot close a hearing. And they get 21 days. So if you were to backtrack 21 days from July 14th, that would be the latest you'd want to send it to DEP.
Let me ask you this, as far as the notice of intent. Since there will be no excavation involved with this, it's basically just going in and pounding in steel fence posts, putting wire up, and we will be installing a pipe. I mean, can an abbreviated notice, will that save me any
That doesn't say
effort?
anything.
Doesn't save
No one
anything?
does that anymore.
All
Sorry.
right.
I can look into it further. I'm sorry, whoever I just stepped
That was
on.
me. That's fine.
I don't know what the merits of an abbreviated notice of intent were ever supposed to be, but I don't think they were ever fully realized. You still need to do abutter notifications, you still need to do a legal ad. There's
no RDA category for something silly like
or
this.
something like this.
How about,
Putting it waste.
is there a limit to the abutter notifications? There's a lot of people at this Brook Valley.
There is a guidance policy that I can send.
I mean, they could be
that
looking
may-
at 100 notifications.
What have you, one beaver deceiver? Or more? It's
Just one.
Just the one.
Yeah, it's, and there's a generic one in the packet. There'll be a fence over the culvert mouth that extends
That
out
sounds-
kind of in a trapezoidal shape. That's the last page.
Is this sent in an email or is this?
No, I'm not
Okay.
sure.
All right.
And there's also a letter in there from our, the consultant that, who would also be contracted to install it. Assuming that's the guy we hire, which I think he will.
I will scan and send this to you tomorrow, just because I don't want to hold the rest of the meeting up for tonight. One thing that kind of, it doesn't really alleviate the burden of notification, but it alleviates the cost impact, and that is you can send them certificates of mailing.
Yes, I did that for the Glendale.
Which is much preferred, and it's a fraction of the cost.
Yeah, okay.
So, does the commission have any further questions for Mr. Gracia?
I believe so.
Bill?
Are there any questions from the public for Mr. Gracia at this time regarding this particular topic? No. All right.
I'm going to be on vacation on the 14th probably, so hopefully all three of you are here.
Or we have a new member maybe by then,
Yeah.
and we'll talk about that.
Oh. Hey, lady.
Don't scare her.
All right, so with that, we're going to move on No updates on the two enforcement orders. Thank you so much
Thanks,
for
Jack.
coming in.
Couple more items on my.
Oh, dear God, okay. So,
Just in case you have a question.
we are getting to you guys.
Oh, that's okay.
Thank you for being so patient.
We
We
see.
I hope you check off like I do. I keep kicking you, I'm sorry.
That's fine.
So, no updates on the enforcement orders. All right, compliance updates, active projects, open permits, to which I will be adding information. But first item, City of Easthampton.
The grading has been installed on
The grading has been?
railing and grading. That's almost done. That should be finished up today or tomorrow. Then it's just a few punch list items. As far as the site goes, anything in your jurisdiction as far as erosion, it's pretty good right now. So if you want to take a look at it.
Well, it looks good.
Well, it looks good.
Yeah,
Right.
it is.
Before it
I
rains,
looked at the bottom of the hills, looks great.
yeah, the worst part, the biggest
Yeah.
threatening part is the slope down at the
Right,
bottom.
that looks
And that's
fantastic.
been holding up
Yeah.
good.
So for the sake of disclosure, both Dan and I work for Ty and Bond. Ty and Bond was the engineer for this project, so we do not participate in this discussion other than to prompt discussion for the members who can participate. So, all right, anything else on that one, Jim? Okay. Paul Street Extension, Jillian Estates has work. We got a weekly report from Mark Reed that I did not print.
I did print it. I had
You
it with
did?
me,
Oh,
so we
thank
can. Yep. I didn't look at it, but I printed it.
Can you hand it over?
Yeah, I would love to.
That's the opposite of what you're supposed to do.
I know. I know. Those are the two of them. One's for the savings bank and one's for the
Okay. Jillian.
Jillian Estates. I
Okay.
think the single one's for Jillian Estates.
So, all right, no construction, stormwater. Wasn't there a big rush?
What was that?
So wasn't there a big rush?
There's always a big rush, and then nothing happens.
Okay, so it's stable.
I should know, because I commit that all the time.
All right, so that's for the file.
Yep.
All right,
Easthampton Savings Bank is next.
Easthampton Savings Bank was this one.
Yep.
And they're holding off till there's drier. Mark isn't
Yes.
hearing enough drier. Okay.
And they're holding off what? Holding off fix
The modification
for the detention basin.
until it's a drier season.
Looks good now. I swim.
Yeah. What pool? We'll name
What was
it a
that?
pool.
What was the Board of Health saying?
And like permanent pools, too many mosquitoes.
Right.
Like, mosquitoes have been here before us. They're gonna be here after us too.
So, so why doesn't the Board of Health have any issue with that? Do they just not have jurisdiction?
They impose their will. Well, one person did.
Okay, all right.
It was the big encephalitis scare and West Nile virus scare and everything else.
Okay.
Mosquitoes don't like pools that big, though. They don't they? I thought they liked tiny little.
But they're
They'll
no
bring in a
predator-
coffee
they're
cup
no-
on the side of the road.
Yeah.
so
There are
they-
no predators in that, really. I mean, dragonfly maybe, but
So we put some frogs in there.
some dragonfly out in. Okay, moving on, Pleasant Street Mills, any updates? No updates, and Jess?
The site looked good last week, so. all the-
They're making the final water main connection toward the park, and that's the last piece. They started at Mechanic Street and they've all the way gone down the whole length of the bike path. There's one last connection to make. They should, once they finish that, then they should start the final
Good.
cleanup of the, whatever else
Phase
they
one.
have to do for phase one.
The last time I trespassed on that site for bicycling purposes, everything looked good.
And how about the last time you trespassed for jogging purposes?
That looks great. Yeah.
And so those big barriers with the orange spray paint kind
Yeah.
of closed.
I know, and every time I go, I have to keep like maneuvering
Yeah.
around
It's a
this way. It's really
regulation,
challenging.
Okay. Glendale, Ladville, West, Pomeroy Meadow intersection and roadway reconstruction project. Jim, how you doing?
Yeah, well,
Looks
based
like they
on,
fixed that erosion and sedimentation control failure.
they did jump when the proper person was told about it, and
Who is the
they-
proper person beyond you?
well, Victoria Strange, who, and well, it's actually the person under her who's got the loudest voice.
Paul?
Paul, yes.
Paul what? I can't remember his last name.
Oh, boy.
Paul, okay, got it.
They
It's
were,
in my notes.
once it was brought to her attention, they did it.
Okay.
Actually, the first time I told them, they did everything along the Glendale Street, the West Street
Mhm.
section,
That's,
but I told them,
it's building up again.
I told them about where the house was torn down,
Mhm.
not the other side of the street. So
Mhm.
when I realized that you meant the other side of the street, I went back again and they cleaned that stuff.
And they fixed this little fence, because
Yeah, it was actually it was trees that fell onto this, or branches that knocked the
Yeah.
fence down.
and you have the great good luck of being on my daily commute.
Yeah. I told him, you're being watched every day.
So the erosion control measures are fixed at this point?
Yes.
Ultimately.
Yep. Okay, 8 Old Stagecoach Road, any
Haven't heard
updates? Okay.
That was actually finished this
Oh.
weekend. It's in, it's not green yet, but it's been
Right.
and seeded.
Okay.
It's been completed, I was there.
Oh, because you have to approve the connection, or?
Well, no, but I happened to be there and I saw the contractor doing the finished raking. So it
So do we need to see
should be
plans from
green,
them, or
should be green in a week.
should we contact them for certificate of compliance?
Let's double check the order of conditions.
3 years from the
Who did the paperwork for them?
Mark Reed.
Mark did it? Okay. Oh, that's right, he did the design, yeah.
Okay. So, Nashwanik Mills, 15 Cottage Street, please.
Ready for us?
Sure. Come on up, introduce yourselves. You clearly have a limited audience here, so.
Hi, I'm Mr. Rowling from Art Street Development. This is Mike Lou from Berkshire Design. Mike's got the
How
design.
did you say your last name? Is it Relic?
Relic.
Okay.
I guess before we get started on the plans that we have, the correspondence from this morning,
On the permit.
on the permit.
Yeah.
The permit has expired.
I'm gonna throw this out to you about the Permit Extension Act.
It didn't fall within the tolling period.
Can fall within the what
The
period?
tolling period? So, basically, the Permit Extension Act only covers permits that were issued or valid between August 15th, 2008 and August 15th, 2010. This was issued March 14th, 2011. That was the date of issuance, I believe. So, unfortunately, the Permit Extension Act and the extension of the Extension Act doesn't apply to this one.
I thought it went to 2012, I guess.
In 2012, the original Extension Act was extended.
Okay.
I'm sorry. And you know what you just said? And that is, I'm sorry, I have had to
Extend the
maintain
extension.
a sense, it's the extension. I mean, I can absolutely understand it. I do work with this
Uh-huh.
on a,
Okay.
I just reviewed this for something in my business day of life, and a permit that was
Wow.
issued before another permit is
I
still
never
valid.
ever heard the
And
term
the
tolling
second
period.
permit.
Yeah, we didn't understand that.
So, that said,
What do we want to talk about first?
That changes what we were at.
But no, we can still talk about it.
Okay.
Absolutely, keep that ball rolling,
Right.
because clearly the project is, it took a little while to get it moving. Building permits weren't issued till the end of December 2013. At this point, administratively, the way the regulations are written, we can't grant an extension
Without
that.
a request.
Right, well, and the request, the way the regs are written, it had to have been filed at least 30 days before the permit was set to expire.
Uh-oh.
And so that said, you were coming to us with modifications anyway.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And that regulatory citations in the email, just so that everyone knew I wasn't making it up. I can't make this stuff up, to be fair.
Yeah, nobody could.
And I understand this is probably not the news you were expecting or ever wanted to hear. But, so in order for a valid permit for there to be a valid permit, we need a new permit application.
Is it an entirely new NOI?
Now, is there,
We can't reopen the old one because the permit expired.
is the entire project covered under, would the entire project have to be covered under an NOI?
Only what's within our jurisdiction. So interior to the building has never been within our jurisdiction. I'd have to look at the plans again. We wouldn't have to revisit the historic mill complex discussion
Right,
because that's
right.
already been established. So it would really be essentially permitting the modified plans. And abutter notifications, legal ad, those,
These are just too big.
those are
I hate the architect for this.
enormous. Okay, so
Never mind. Let me think. This is, just to orientation, this purple line is the 200-foot riverfront, from the canal.
So north is,
No,
so
it's-
Lower Mill Pond is that way.
Correct.
Yeah,
This is Cottage Street.
there we go. And the driveway is
Right.
that slope.
So conceivably, is it possible to continue, for instance, utility work?
Outside our
Yeah.
jurisdiction, yes.
I'm just trying to figure out a way to, that the contractor doesn't have to.
Stop.
Exactly, yeah.
Right. And hopefully I phrased that so that it was only the areas within our jurisdiction. Because we don't, under the Wetlands Protection Act, we don't have jurisdiction beyond that. We have another concern that we want to talk about. But again, that looks like, as before, it was parking related. Stormwater management and parking, is that essentially what was within our jurisdiction before?
Yeah, now, right. Essentially, stormwater, this slipped my mind too. The order of conditions states that this project is not subject to mass stormwater standards. And I
I don't have a copy.
was like wondering, wait, how did that happen? But,
It was.
is it having to
is
do
it-
with the historic, the
Is
mill
or is
district?
not? Could I see your copy? 'Cause that
It's
doesn't make
because it's a
sense.
redevelopment project and it was discharging through an existing woodfall.
So, and
Point.
the way.
And it was before our stormwater ordinance was
And the
promulgated.
way that worked is the permeable pavement, correct?
That was for the riverfront.
That was
area.
riverfront,
Yeah, that had to
okay.
do with the riverfront. It was
So was it not increasing impervious area? Is that how
Yeah.
that worked?
Or it was,
Thank
you
you.
know, establishing, equal peak rates of runoff or something. No?
That's not how it's subject to or not, though.
Well, right, probably Kelly wrote it and did.
And Kelly, and not to throw Kelly under the bus,
Right,
but
yeah.
Kelly wrote this one,
Yeah.
so.
And I don't remember that any of you were on the committee,
We were
Commission
there.
back
We were,
when.
Here.
I was.
yeah,
all right.
You
but that's
probably-
okay. No offense taken.
Yeah.
Kelly is a very strong voice.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well,
Well, I'm not sure where we go from here at this point, but maybe if we talk about the revisions, the changes to the plan, because I think they'll make sense to you, even though some of it's out of your jurisdiction, but it still has to do with the stormwater flows and the high groundwater issue mainly. But, as you know, there's crappy soils across the whole site, as it turns out. You've been on site on this side as you come in on the road. The existing road comes in and kind of does this. It lines way over here into this existing parking lot. In order to get increase the parking down here, the road was, straightened out and curved around the north side of that road parking lot. The slope here, you've seen all the breakouts. There's apparently all this weeping groundwater coming out, and it's very hard to control. One of the main things, and this actually was the site contractor's idea, was to take this road. It used to come down at a constant 5%, like we'd break this corner essentially, and then it came down at a constant 5% pitch down to here. He suggested like keeping this more level at 2.5% or flattening it out so it stays up higher, and then pitching it, diving it like at the end here at 7.5%, and we get back down to the same grade here to meet the parking lot. And I forget, but there's one point in here where it actually elevates the road by I think 7 or to 8 feet, which I thought, wow, that's great, because we can avoid cutting into this hillside and hopefully fix the hill with the erosion that's going on, and I'm hoping that it can be fixed with without like riprap, means of riprapping the slope, for instance, or something like that, which would be extremely ugly and hard to vegetate, etc. So that's one of the main things, is changing the grade of the road. The permeable parking that we had, it was 13 spaces over here, and after I read through the order of conditions, I realized, oh yeah, we can't, the proposal on this plan is just to try to eliminate some of those permeable parking spaces and move some back down here, but then that's pushing it into the riverfront area, and the order of conditions specifically says to push those away from the riverfront area. So I'm not sure we can do, we're proposing to do some permeable paving here, and switching or providing this another LID method of doing a rain garden here, which seems to make a lot more sense, because this rain garden, treating the water in this parking lot, would do a lot more for stormwater than having pieces of permeable paving here that were essentially just catching water that was coming
Wasn't there
down the
already a
hill.
rain garden proposed in there?
No.
There was not.
No, we had,
here, that was-
for stormwater, there was an underground infiltration basin right here. That hasn't changed.
Okay.
But water would have been directed into it and then flowed out and connected to this existing drain pipe, which discharges to the canal
Okay.
eventually.
And that's different than the pipe that has been intercepting runoff from the site.
Yeah,
That's closer to that metal grate bridge, and I'm
yeah,
just having trouble
that pipe is
picturing.
down here.
Right.
There's this like buried culvert in this area.
Yeah, with a
And-
PVC pipe in it.
Right, and so that's actually off the property, but
It
still,
is.
a lot of water, it all goes downhill, obviously, and there have been problems here.
Mhm.
You saw by some of the photos, the contractor did try to
Mhm.
put the straw wattles, I believe it was, around there. It does get run over a lot, because a lot of folks at Riverside park over here,
Mhm.
so.
Oh, that's why the traffic comes in there.
Yeah, so he had put the cones, and I had even suggested to him, why don't you put up a concrete barrier right there? I don't know if he ever did that, but that seems like it would kind of solve the problem of having cars drive over the straw wattle. He could go and check it and replace it if needed, but certainly if cars and vehicles keep running over it, he's gonna have to deal with it
Mhm.
more frequently, but whatever, we're dealing with that.
And that- Whatever he does there also has to be acceptable to Riverside, since that's their property.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
and I'm glad to see,
Oh.
I was glad to see that they were being,
Riverside does attend your weekly meetings, and he's pretty much been kept informed of everything that goes on the
Yeah,
site.
Rich
Who from
Kavasik.
River-
Rich
okay.
Kavasik is there
Yeah.
every week.
So another thing we wanted to do, just to protect the roadway and the integrity of the base, is add like a French drain along here, which would intercept groundwater as well as surface flows, and connect it, into the manhole downstream from this. It doesn't need to be put through the underground detention basin. The slope, if we raise this, the slope, we had it originally designed at a 2-to-1 slope.
Mhm.
We would even do it at a 3-to-1, or maybe flatter if we can, to limit or reduce the exposure and risk of having erosion occur on that slope. So lifting the road helps the grading also on that slope.
I'm sorry, can you, while we're talking about that slope, can you refresh my memory? What is obviously the stability of that slope is a problem, and it's contributing to the sediment load leaving the site. What is the long-term plan to stabilize that? Loam and seed, some sort of
I'm hoping.
vegetated cover?
I'm hoping we can loam and seed it and get vegetative cover on it.
Is there
When
going to be
we
an
were-
erosion control blanket to further hold it together? Because if that
Yes,
keeps running into that
It will be a
culvert.
combination, or probably all of the above. I want to do anything we can except riprap. And I hope you agree with that. I mean, riprap would be, I don't know, relatively inexpensive, way to handle it, but it would look like a highway slope, you know, the kinds that you see when you're driving down. You know, the highway with these big slopes, although the slope's not tall, but, you know, still, it's a blanket, it's a stone blanket. And we had originally thought there was 3 or 4 breakout points, but it's pretty much constant. And originally we had suggested, well, we're gonna have to rip wrap a couple of channels, you know, but it's really, and I agree with the site contractor, he feels it's basically gonna be from here all the way down. Plus the fact that after he's been poking around over here, above where the permeable parking spaces are proposed, or were proposed here in this plan, he feels that this slope is more susceptible to erosion than what he's already done here. So he doesn't want to touch that. If we put the permeable spaces in here, we're going to be cutting into that hillside, you know, even more. So we'd like to do anything we could to reduce touching that hillside. And even though this grading, this revised grading shows the slope going back, it's still a little bit better than this plan, I think.
It seems like a less steep slope.
We might, yeah, if this is less steep, we still might have to use some riprap over here. We don't really know yet, but I think riprap is, I'm gonna call it the worst case scenario, or, you know, for aesthetics.
How are you gonna handle it though if you bring this roadway up 7 feet at, you know, at some points? How are you gonna handle the downstream slope? Because now you're just gonna have a really steep slope getting down to the parking lot.
Actually, when I looked at this slope, it's not much different than that. I mean, it's a little bit, it's obviously a little bit taller.
Yeah.
But, you know, we certainly are gonna be looking at this area because, you know, this area, the landform's changing as well. This bay of parking staying the same. This one's getting, you know, we want to pitch it a little bit more to gain some ground at this corner, to reduce the slope. But you're right, this slope will become longer and taller. So potentially there's an issue with, you know, breakouts happening there. But what we were trying to do here is, with the raising the grade of the road and putting the French drain in, is that hopefully we can intercept the groundwater, you know, before it works its way and deteriorates the roadbed, so that, you know, it you call it settles or whatever, yeah, and hopefully keep it from, you know, going through the winter action of, you know, heaving too, like diverting that groundwater.
Yeah.
We do that. So we had proposed, you know, this rain garden in the center here. We're also proposing to do a rain garden in this low area, and they actually found that the material here is sandier, so we have better infiltration. Now, there are a number of roof drains coming off the building, a number of which are coming off of this side. So we thought we could put a rain garden here and direct the roof leaders into it, let it do its thing. If it overflows, it's just gonna go by surface down here into the canal, which it does now. There's actually a sluiceway cut into that concrete wall of the canal where the drainage is directed, but we can probably capture some here and get it into the ground. And, you know, that's obviously, even, it's clean water, but still we're trying to infiltrate some. There's a number of foundation drains that we want to add around the building, notably on the inside courtyard area and then along these two sides, the south and east, I'm calling them. There's been a lot of groundwater there. There's been deterioration of the concrete, actually. So they're going to have to, we'd like to put foundation drains along there. This one is, we're proposing to run it in this direction. This one's actually deeper by like 6 or 7 feet. And this one's going to go around the building and come down and then tie in to a structure here. And just, that'll be groundwater that'll be directed away from the building.
I'm sorry, where does the east tie in? The tie-in from the east drain, where does that then?
It splits here.
Okay.
This is going this way,
Yep,
and this one's going that way.
And where does that go eventually?
This is, we're proposing to tie it into there's existing area drains that we have along this side for surface water. It's the water sloping down against the building here. We're tying it into here.
And then where does it go from there?
This is an infiltration trench.
Okay.
And we actually had the infiltration trench in a number of pipes over here, a little bit downstream, but this area where the existing building was demolished, there was contaminated soils. So we couldn't infiltrate, do ground infiltration there. So we moved that over here, it's a little bit upstream of the drainage system, but we're still catching clean water, putting it underground, and then, it continues on its way and ties in eventually over here. Those are kind of like the highlights of the changes. I'm not sure how they are related to the areas of your jurisdiction, but I don't think they would impact the canal. We just have to be very careful with the erosion that's going on during construction. It's a very limited area where all these vehicles are moving, and obviously there's exposed soils now. So that's the main thing I think we have to contend with.
Yeah, and the length of time that those soils have been exposed seems longer than is typically allowed under the NIPD's construction general permit. That's normally a 14-day period.
Okay.
And please again forgive me. What is there a SWIP for this? I almost want to say we received it electronically, but I can't find a record of it. So I imagine this cumulatively exceeds the 1 acre threshold. Is that?
I'll have to find out, because we have prepared a stormwater report, and usually there's some language about
The stormwater pollution prevention plan.
But I don't think specifically like the SWIP that goes along with the NEPD's permit.
Yeah.
I don't think that was prepared, and you have to excuse us, but the contractor thought, because of the notice of intent, it said something about not being
But
subject.
that's-
I know. And
So that's understood.
It was misread. We
Mhm.
will prepare a SWIP and,
Okay.
and have the contractor file the NEPD's paperwork. But let me check on our engineers typically prepare some report on storm sedimentation control. That should be part of it.
Construction period pollution prevention
Right.
plan.
Let me double check.
So there is no NIPD's permit for this project?
To my knowledge, it hasn't been filed.
That is not our jurisdiction. That was more my
Interesting.
frame of reference.
Okay.
So, so moving forward, again, our schedules on the city's website, we strive to meet twice a month. We already know we're gonna have a hard time gathering quorum in July. The July meetings, I won't be present for the second July meeting. I'm not coming back for it.
The first one was the 14th?
The first one is July 14th.
Okay.
The deadline for July 14th is June 30th. The deadline for July 28th is July 14th. So since the commission also has jurisdiction, and Dan can definitely speak to this far more than I can, but the city has a stormwater ordinance. And can you talk about Concom, how potentially jurisdiction would fall to Conservation Commission in this instance, under the stormwater ordinance?
Yeah, so the stormwater ordinance, which was approved by the city council in May of 2011, so it was after this project came through. It splits responsibilities between Conservation Commission, city engineer, planning board, then building inspector, depending on how big the project is and what you're going before. And since I think it falls back to the Conservation Commission for larger projects, or projects where there's a notice of intent, regardless of what else is going on. I mean, it pretty much reflects all the Wetlands Protection Act stormwater stuff, basically. But it does have a requirement for, seeding areas or stabilizing areas that aren't going to be, touched in a certain period of time. And so that jurisdiction would extend to the whole site, not just, areas within the jurisdictional resource areas and buffer zones and all that. But, like I said, it doesn't usually change much with most projects, especially for a redevelopment project and, that kind of thing.
Right. It was more intended to capture projects that didn't fall within Wetlands Protection Act stormwater, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that's, you can get the text for that. I think it's just in with the city ordinances and everything like that.
All right.
Yeah, there's no regulations, just an ordinance.
All right.
I think what's gonna happen is, our engineers will be reviewing the ordinance and then kind of like working with the contractor to put together the SWIP. The owner, operator, GC, I guess in this case, will probably be responsible for filing the NEPD's, paperwork and sending that in. And I assume you're gonna wanna have copies of everything, right? And
Electronic is,
Is preferred,
to the
or-
it is, because if it gets emailed as a PDF to the Conservation Commission's email,
Mhm.
conservation@easthampton. You know that one.
Yeah.
Then that gets checked usually daily during the
Uh-huh.
the business week and distributed beyond. And then it's easier because we don't have to rely on a central file
Right.
system. We can check it
Okay.
more at our leisure and at our convenience, more convenience than anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the things I guess I want to clarify is, for whatever, moving forward when we do, is the permeable paving. And would you accept an alternate form of stormwater management? We were, I mean, realistically, that we threw that in at the end over some concern about trying to provide some kind of LID techniques to deal with stormwater.
So you still need to run through the riverfront area standards.
Yeah.
So whatever's proposed, whether it's to comply with stormwater management or the riverfront area performance standards, that's where that needs to come into the mix.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my
And-
understanding of the permeable pavement was not that it was for stormwater reasons, but because more parking was needed and it needed to
Riverfront
be
area
in the riverfront
redevelopment.
area.
Or
Exactly.
previously developed and degraded, it needed to be an
It
improvement. Was
needed
that
to
it?
be some, yeah, well, that would make
I
sense.
don't remember the specifics, I just had a kid.
Yeah, and maybe that we just didn't feel comfortable permitting impermeable area within the riverfront,
Mhm.
basically a new
Would it
and
have been
expanded
new
area from the
impermeable?
riverfront area.
Is it a new impermeable? Because the rest of it's
So
already
where-
paved, maybe we,
On this plan, most of those 13 spaces was outside the riverfront area. Wonder why we didn't just pull those last two out altogether.
Yeah, it made sense at the time, and it was a combination of riverfront reasons and stormwater reasons, I
Mhm.
think, but,
But I guess if we comply with the Riverfront Act, with, whatever we're proposing,
Right, I
whether it
think-
falls into whatever redevelopment, stormwater, improvement or enhancement. Now, we still have a lot of native plantings that were part of the plan. There's not shown on this as planting, but there were native plantings down in that area in the riverfront. So those would be still part of the project, obviously. I'm not sure if, do you feel comfortable with us saying we're gonna prepare these documents and plan changes and comply with, the standards and allow construction to keep going on? I mean, there's lots to do inside. There's still.
Construction outside riverfront area can proceed.
Okay, all right.
That's not our geographic jurisdiction.
And then
And that's most of it.
Mhm. Yeah,
But before that work can continue,
we'll have to.
you need to file and get that order of conditions and in your, if anything can be in your favor, it's that we're familiar with it. We've had this discussion tonight. So it'll be a matter of timing relative to the commission schedule and getting a DEP file number, and whatever is actually put forward for documentation to meet the standards. But
yeah, and the actual construction outside of our jurisdiction still needs to be handled appropriately so it's not impacting
Oh,
the
yeah,
Right.
in our
right,
jurisdiction.
there's-
And that's what we
yeah.
were kind of witnessing out there.
We
this
keep
last
hoping,
weekend.
I keep asking the contractor every time I see him, things drying out there, but
the hillside keeps weeping. I don't know, I haven't
Right.
checked in a couple weeks, to be
Did we
honest with you.
talk about
but
that catch basin that it's sweeping into?
There's that weird catch basin, yeah.
Is it, yeah.
Can you,
The existing,
There's a-
there's
There's
one.
an existing
there's an
catch basin
existing
that's-
catch basin in Trap
Yes.
Rock on the slope.
Outside of our jurisdiction.
Yeah.
Well,
It could be there.
there's an existing manhole that was
That's
found
definitely
here,
not
and
it.
there's one that comes up, there's a catch basin right there with, that's another thing,
That's
we have to
probably it.
maintain this catch basin, because there's apparently incoming pipes that are still functioning.
Right. But there's
I
no,
think it was further, was it further back?
it might be that one, it's just that the roadway is not, the revised roadway
Right.
is
Yeah,
not
the
going.
existing
Maybe that's
roadway,
what that
the
is.
existing roadway used to came down like this.
Right,
Yep.
so
it would have
it's,
been on your right
Mhm.
side.
Yep.
Yeah, it was definitely
That's-
on the non,
there's no
Active
hay bales
side.
or any sort of sediment, erosion and sediment
Oh.
controls around
Is
that.
that,
and if that's there, then it's going
Right out to
way
the,
downstream where we are observing it. It's
do you know
really,
where that- do you know where that
Not sure I
is?
do.
Is that in that gully? We call this the gully,
it might be in the gully.
and it's kind of
Yeah.
leading right through that.
it's
The-
kind of in the dirt, it's just out in the dirt, just downstream of what is now a kind of a ponded area.
Okay, that little impoundment.
Right, it's
That needs
just-
that needs to be cleaned out.
And that
Yeah.
needs to be
In order,
cleaned out in a
there's
big
just a
way.
lot of accumulated
Right.
material that is
Yeah,
taking
straw
up the
wattles are
capacity and
almost-
it's not going to function if it rains
Yeah.
again.
Oh, yeah, so it's
The-
pretty much right, so it's, look at this, it's pretty much right behind the structure, it's kind of in,
Yeah, okay.
you know, so you've got the catch basin somewhere over in this area. When we were walking around it to find out why there was some drainage coming off
Yeah.
the slope, we found the catch basin.
Okay,
I think it was either up in here.
Because, yeah, the new road would come over here like this and kind of swing over.
Is it right in the stone?
It's not in the stone, no, it's out in the dirt area.
Okay, all right.
Anyway, so there's a catch basin out there that doesn't have any erosion or sediment control around it. If we can, that's something that really needs to be addressed.
Okay.
And can you clarify for me, because there's Welch and there's Dietz. Which one is responsible for the erosion and sedimentation controls on the site?
I mean, Welch, it's under Welch's contract with
Okay, and
us.
Dietz is working for Welch?
Correct.
Okay. Thank
That's
you.
why, yeah, you're getting, I think you've gotten communication.
Everybody.
Yeah.
Which I'd rather have everybody on it than not the right
All
person,
right.
so that's fine. I just wanted to understand the relationship.
Dave's doing, I mean, the bulk of the site work obviously is Dave's handling.
Right.
Okay.
right.
All right.
You're probably very familiar with him in town. He's done a lot of work in town and whatever, but.
Somewhere in the industrial park. So, all right.
We'll have him clean out that area.
He's been
and then-
very responsive, you know,
Yeah.
when issues come up, he
Mhm.
jumps on them. So maybe he doesn't necessarily check things every day, but he's, you know,
No, if there's,
he'll get on top of it.
and if there's a precipitation event in the forecast, if you could please maybe ask him to bolster,
Mhm.
reposition, secure the existing controls, or,
Because a lot of the controls have been driven over, they're broken.
I know.
yeah, and I
Socks are
understand
damaged.
it's a tough site, but if you could do that proactively instead of reactively, that would free up more time. Yeah,
Yeah. Okay, understood.
that's great.
Let him do that.
Thank you. All right, is there anything else tonight?
I think so.
Well, thank you for
Not from us.
coming out.
I think you gave us enough.
Okay, great, see you. No,
Well, next meeting with us, I appreciate
well,
it.
thank you for coming in and, you know, having seen this ahead of time will definitely help us move
Good.
things along. I know the deadlines are only 2 weeks before a meeting. If you can submit things 3 weeks, get DEP their copy, get the Concom and DEP their copies 3 weeks ahead of time, then you stand a much better chance of having that file number.
And could you repeat your summer schedule again?
Sure, it's on the website, but,
Okay.
and this is pre-finalized. So, our next meeting is June 23rd, which tonight was the deadline for. So June 30th is the deadline for July 14th. July 14th is the deadline for July 28th. And again, that,
Basically, we're second and fourth.
second and fourth Mondays, and that actually holds
Submissions
up
2 weeks
during
before.
July, August, and September.
Yeah, till Labor Day, I guess.
Yeah, we
Or,
haven't been going around.
To Columbus Day.
Columbus
We
Day.
we had to finagle around Columbus Day, so we're like first and fourth. in October, but that is probably not the schedule you're hoping for. So, hopefully we'll see you again soon.
Yeah, assuming we have quorum, which we're working on,
Yeah.
keep working on.
We'll have to worry about that, I guess, as it comes, right?
Right, and, you know, submit in good faith, and we'll do our best, you know, barring vacation and work schedules, to have at least 3 people here.
Mhm.
That's our quorum number right now, so. And it will be even if we get a 5th member, which just gives us more flexibility. All right, thank you
Okay.
Thank
both
you.
very
Thanks.
much.
Thank you.
Okay, so, who needs it? All right. So the next 2 items I put on here, logistically, I have the request for consideration, because Jess has given me a little leeway, but I don't want to drag my feet. I don't have the conditions worked out for the Nashwanik Pond Promenade boardwalk, but can we sign the order, sign the pay sheet tonight, and I'll get her that tomorrow? Because they're pretty much our standard
Yes.
conditions.
You're asking us how much we trust you.
So we're gonna say that the order of conditions will be delivered to.
Hand delivered, or delivered to the city tomorrow.
Now, should I make fun of Jay's signature twice during a meeting, or just once?
I don't want to push Jay's good nature.
I've been
And
trying
then,
to see how far it goes.
dude, if you make him walk out,
They're
I'm gonna
say
split you in 2 so that you can cover 2 seats. And then I do have the order for the Oxbow all set to sign. With our pretty much our standard conditions. Thank you.
It's a barrel laughs every week, Ashley, or every 2 weeks.
Chris has been quiet. I think it's because he's not sitting next to me.
I know. Well, we are being
So-
recorded, right? So I am trying to do better with the recordings on.
Okay, so, we have, who's all set? Alright, I'll take care of this paperwork tomorrow. 2, 3, no updates. I mean, the Shared Conservation Commission agent discussion is moving along. Just had a meeting scheduled with Southampton and the chair of Southampton Concom and the PVPC rep, or person assigned to this project, but it was during the day and I couldn't break away to attend, and I don't know if she put it out to everyone.
She didn't contact me yet. She was
Okay.
an email when that was gonna happen, but it's okay.
I don't know if it happened or not.
All right, okay.
Meeting minutes approval. Apparently we have May 19th. What happened to April 14th?
We didn't have the right people here to approve April 14th
Okay.
at the time.
Do we know?
Do we have a copy of April 14th?
That's what we look for, because,
Okay,
This is
so,
what happens when you're not here, Chris.
I had April 14th. April 14th. Why do I have April 14th? Dan and Jerry were not here, so it's Melissa, myself, and Jay.
okay. And we've all reviewed them.
Yes.
So would anyone like to make a
so
motion?
make a motion that we approve the minutes from April 14th.
I second the motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
You can't, we're not here.
We're not here.
Oh, thank you, Chewbacca.
One more, guys, one more.
Okay.
And who was here for May 19th?
I was.
I was.
We
so-
all were.
I was not. I was
Oh,
not.
okay.
So I'll make a motion that we approve the minutes of May 19th.
I'll second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So moved. No correspondence. Motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
There's no other correspondence? We don't want to go through correspondence?
You can just say, unless there are objections.
So moved.
Okay.